Relevant to our interests is brought to you by chicken. Chicken? Chicken is doom.
Hey, hello, and welcome. You are listening to Relevant to Our Interests. I'm Frank, and with me as always is...
Some guy you just found, who hacked into this very lazily.
A hobo!
And that's actually something good to know, is that somebody who is unsheltered is unsheltered. Somebody who's a hobo has chosen the lifestyle. It's true. There's actually a technically different term.
It is.
The more you know.
Yeah, that was terrible. Hey, John. So, I'm pretty excited about today's episode. I got to be honest. You're futzing with your mic. That concerns me.
Well, that's between me and my mic, Frank.
That's fair, but it will be between me and the audio output of that intimate relationship you two have. Will be my problem later. So,
well, I mean, technically speaking, it's your problem always.
That's fair.
Be fair. Basically, I'm just trying to make sure I get some clipping gone. I also think I need to pick up one of the toppy things to help with that. Little covers.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. So I am very excited about today's episode. We talked about this on the old version of the podcast. And when we talked about it, I think we only had up through volume 9 or 10 read. But we have the entire damn thing because this thing ended, they wrapped this up in 2016. So we have all 60 issues. And of course, we're talking about the comic Chew by John Layman and Rob Guillory. But before that, just a couple of short things. Catching up a bit. Today we're not going to talk about medical emergencies. Today I'm going to talk about my birthday. It's coming up here in a couple weeks.
It is indeed.
And I'm very excited about it.
Almost Frank's
birthday. I'm going to be another year older. I'm in my 40s and it's terrible. And my plan is, so I lied. I'm going to talk about my surgery. I can't drive over the mountains quite yet, and I won't be able to for my birthday.
Yeah.
But my plan is to actually go out, and I'm doing this a couple of weeks after my birthday, to go out and hang out with John and his partner and spend the weekend just chilling, having fun. And I'm excited. Maybe go out and see a play if there's anything playing, or, just to have a good time. And I'm excited. I haven't been out to do something like that in quite a while. So I get to inflict my presence on other people, some of whom don't mind my presence. So happy birthday to me. Yeah. And if you're curious, my birthday is the 20th of this month, January. So woohoo.
Yay.
John, do you have anything you want to bring? That's all I have. That's literally all I got.
See, last time was the hospital thing.
Yeah.
Things I've done. Oh, I've gotten a drink mate, which is a little thing to fizzy up your drinks. But unlike some of the others where you need the special things there and it'll add the water for you and whatever, this literally just infuses your beverage with CO2.
So basically, it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, doesn't matter what. As long as it's not if it's too pulpy, then it becomes a problem because it kind of clogs up the internals. But aside from that, it's literally just I did some juice that I infused. I did just some of that that flavored water stuff that we use.
Yeah.
Use some of that there. It was, but it's not bad at all. And it has this kind of big CO2 cartridge thing you put in. And that was pretty nice. I also, one thing I've done is I mean, I'm still missing a bunch of it, but I have got all of my game books out of boxes, at least as far as I know. There's probably still some hidden throughout the house in my parents' place.
And fun fact, one of the reasons why you ended up doing that
was
for looking for the books
to find the last one for Chew that I did not find. And Frank
I mailed you my two copies so you could read it. For this, which is fine because I'm going out to see you. I'm going out to see them. I'll just get them when I come out there.
Yeah. And I think as soon as I have the extra, I'll just pick up another copy of it so that I have all of the Omnivores editions.
Yeah, I'd actually like to pick up the Omnivore editions, and that's next on the agenda. Yeah. But if you're ready, without further ado,
one last thing. So there is one more ado.
Damn you, John!
I started playing. What was it? Viscera Cleanup. Shit, what's the name of the goddamn game? Viscera Cleanup Detail. Oh
Jesus Christ, that sounds horrible.
It's on it's on Steam. It's actually surprisingly fun. I mean, you're literally just you're like the cleanup crew, but you're like the cleanup crew, obviously, of all of these different like sci-fi movies and stuff. Like I just about finished a level that you have very clearly gone against the Alien versus Predator thing there. There's one where it's like a robot uprising that you're cleaning up from. It's delightful, and it's multiplayer. And if you ever get a computer that will run it, I want
someday soon.
Yes, and then we will.
In the next 6 months, I'll be up. I'm going to be upgrading because I need to upgrade.
Yeah,
and retire my laptop to just a writing laptop.
Well, this is also it's an older, slightly older game, so I think it should be.
I could probably get it to run on this laptop. This laptop is clunking along. It's
I know. I'm just saying that I think that there's a certainty once you level up there, and it's surprisingly mostly it's so like it's incredibly gory, but also like real like tongue in cheek about it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a lot of fun. Like there's a bit where you actually run into the space the space one where they jump through the faster than light, and it's hell.
You're talking about Event Horizon.
Yeah, Event Horizon. Yeah, there's a level that is clearly inspired by Event Horizon that you can go and do the cleanup on.
That's something I actually wouldn't mind talking about on this because I really like Event Horizon.
What I would love to do with that is I would love to do get at the very least that one and Hellraiser 4 and and possibly find some other ones because there are some other ones there, but doing doing an actual like compare and contrast. Yeah. Like not just do that one, but do like both of them. I think that could be a lot of fun.
That actually could be a lot of fun. Anyway, so
yes.
Now are we ready to continue?
Until I think of something to
we're going to start. All right, so today's episode we're talking about the comic book series Chew, written by John Layman and art by Rob Guillory. We give you a little bit of background to this. First off, John Layman, he's a comic book writer and an artist. He's been writing in comics full time since 2002, but he worked as an editor for Wildstorm Comics before that. He's primarily worked for Marvel. Specifically, he did writing for Marvel Zombies, as well as a bunch of licensed material, including like Xena, Warrior Princess, and Army of Darkness. He's also worked as a writer for Cryptic Studios, the game studio. He come up with the Chew, and I don't have an exact date when he came up with the idea for Chew, but Chew
might say in the back of the comic. Give me a second.
He probably does in one of the volumes. He did have the ending for it planned from the very beginning, and he told Rob about it when he first met him in 2007.
Well, and he makes it sound, because I read the little thing about it there. He makes it sound like I was drunk and I was like following him around the party and just wouldn't shut up about this whole whole thing there. Like it sounds annoying and adorable at the same time.
There are really nice, and it sounds like something I would absolutely do.
It was 2007 is when it...
2007. That's what I said.
Yes. Well, I was double checking because we weren't sure. Or maybe, I don't know.
Well,
I was double checking 2007 something, and that's the one that...
2007 is when he talked to Rob about it, but when he came up with the actual concept of Tony, I think it was way before that. Because it's an idea that he was looking for an artist.
Yeah, according to Rob, it was actually 2008 when that happened. So
2008, okay.
Yeah. So there is,
but
so even they're like sort of unsure as to which one's which.
So yeah, he talked to Rob in 2008 about it. Fun fact, and this is something that I got from an interview from Comics Pow, which is a website that looks at comics and reviews comics. I actually just discovered it when I was doing a little bit of research for this podcast. It's actually pretty fun. Mm-hmm. They do an interview at I can actually tell you which, the Baltimore Comic Con. The guy interviews both Rob and John, and they talk to John about Tony being Asian. One of the reasons that John conceived Tony as an Asian character is because John's wife is Asian, and he wanted to give his son a hero, like a comic book hero.
That's that's really cool. I really like that.
He also comments in that same interview. He's like, that being said, my son looks exactly like me. So
yeah,
but no, that I think that really is cool, and
that's really
sweet. I will drop a link to that interview into Comic Pal's website. It's a cool little website. I had never come across it before, but it's still putting out content. There's I think 3 people that do it, that contribute to it. So if you, dear listener, want to check it out, we'll have a link to both interviews there. Rob Guillory had been doing indie comics in the early 2000s, but he hadn't had a permanent gig. Chew was his first big gig. John came to him specifically because of his art style. And that was a massive kind of mix-up, because usually Rob was being asked to change his art style, and John's like, no, I like the way you do shit. Let's do this.
I have to say, one of the things that I have always loved about Rob and this comic in general is that it's bold in just like choosing to do something that is not like anything else. Like Chew looks like nothing, like no other property, and
it's very distinct the way the way the art is,
and it feels, and it gives it just another little layer of special.
When Rob first started doing the art, he was pretty tentative about it, because I mean, even though John's like, I like your art style, you do what you do. If you've been asked to change stuff up and you've had to kind of adjust your style for other creators, you're going to come into it a little bit cautious. But as he went on and John was like, yeah, go ahead and, just kind of let him do what he wanted, he started really exploring the character design, started hiding Easter eggs in the background. And the Easter eggs, there's tons of.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much, especially as you go on. And John says that like almost all of those Easter eggs are all Rob. The first issue of Chew was released in June of 2009. Chew won 2 Eisner Awards, the first in 2010 for Best New Series and the second in 2011 for Best Continuing Series. It also won 2 Harvey Awards, the first for the Best New Talent for Rob Guillory in 2010, and the second for Best New Series, also in 2010. Both of these are comic book industry awards. I would elaborate more on them. I know I've heard of both of them. I don't know enough details, and I did not read enough for this podcast, but Eisner's and Harvey Awards are kind of a big deal. So
yeah. I mean, it's like the
Grammy. I would say they're sort of like the Emmys and the Golden Globes of comic books.
Yeah.
That's a rough comparison. So this, for folks that listen to us, for the 5 of you that listen to our episodes, we usually give fairly detailed commentary on the plot, with John and me interjecting our thoughts as we go. We can't do that with this. This is super complicated. The plot is just too big. There's a whole bunch of subplots. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of smaller arcs
and the thing is that like some of it's not even necessarily size, it's complexity. Like there's just there's so many little it's so many little things that are all kind of moving towards there, because it's like it starts out as a fairly kind of straightforward procedural / mystery, and then the more it goes, the more it becomes something else distinctly that I'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah. And so which maybe a relief for some people, because like we can't talk about the plot of this in the way we would do before, and we can't even talk about all the individual characters because there's a lot of smaller characters that pop up. So we have to keep it to the central core characters, and there's still a ton of those.
Yeah.
So basically, we're approaching this is, we obviously will touch on the plot, and we're also going to talk on the characters, but we're also going to talk about the powers and stuff, in kind of the world in general. So with that being said, there are 3 primary arcs, and we're going to give a brief summary towards the end on each of these. And the arcs are interlinked. They do weave into each other and culminate into a final point. The world itself is kind of an alternative Earth. Approximately 2 years before the story begins, the world suffered from a massive outbreak of the bird flu that killed 160 million people. This caused the FDA to become the most powerful law enforcement agency in the U.S. because the government banned chicken and poultry in general. And also, people have powers based on food or around food. And the powers, there is a list of, I think, about 50 powers. I found like the full list of powers for this world. We're going to talk about 7 of them. The food-related powers. The powers either involve, there's basically 3, kind of 2 groups, and then one group has like a subset, 2 subsets. They either involve eating food or the presentation or preparation of food.
Yeah. Or sometimes or in at least one case, just thinking about food.
Yeah. So those that involve eating food, or consuming food, the powers do something to the person that eats it. Those that involve the preparation or presentation of food, the powers involve the person that's consuming it, are consuming the thing around that presentation. So there is a subset of the presentation of food where people use food to like create objects. Case in point, the chocosuck sculpteur, who can sculpt chocolate to the point that it mimics the thing that is sculpted.
Perfect.
Whether it's a knife or a laser gun.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some variations on that. There's like some guys that like create armor and weapons out of Jell-O, but it's like specific flavors out of Jell-O.
There's some that have like not exactly the same, but comparable abilities with vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. So the primary and the central power, which is what the main character and the main antagonists have, is he's called the Cebopath. And the Cebopath gets psychic impressions from the things that they eat. Meaning if they eat an apple, they have flashes of where the apple was, the truck that it came in on, the pesticides that's used, the people that picked it. If they eat a cow or a hamburger, then they'll get flashes of the slaughterhouse, and they'll get flashes of it being out in the field and all of that. One thing about Cebopathy is if they consume enough of a person or an animal with extreme talents, i.e. most of that being or thing, then they can absorb those powers or abilities that person has. Yeah. And that's important because it becomes a central focus of the comic as it goes.
And it's not even limited to just the supernatural abilities, like the people there. Like, for example, due to circumstances, there's a bit where Tony ends up being forced to eat a shitload of baseball players. And he comes out of it with like the ability to throw a fastball, a fastball hard enough to like shatter bone, like to like just outright kill people with a fastball. Like it's so it's also like cumulative. It's also like a cumulative thing. Like things will like start to like combine together within the Cebopath. Yeah.
All of these abilities are actually kind of central to the plot in one way or another. There's Sabo Scriveners, and this is one of those presentation of food. The Sabo Scrivener can write about food so vividly that the reader has a sensation of consuming it while they read it. The related power to that is a Sabo Conscribo, which is the ability to convey the feelings of flavor to stories that the person writes. The same character has both of these abilities. The Sabo Conscribo ability is developed in a story-related way, which we'll talk about. Then there's Sebo Voyant, and the Sebo Voyant can see the future of anything that the eater consumes that's living. And it only works on living things. They can't bite a dead thing and see the future of that, or they can't bite an inanimate thing.
I actually had a thought on that. I don't remember if it's explicitly said in the comics or just something that I extrapolated, but that ability to see the future of a living thing, of course it's not going to work on dead stuff because dead stuff doesn't have a future anymore because it's dead.
I actually thought about the same. I actually thought the same thing, and I'm actually kind of glad you brought that up because I didn't want to say it, but I was hoping you would. So because that's obvious, right?
Yeah.
The next thing is the Victulocusaire, and this is a really weird ability, and it comes up right towards the end of the comic run, and it's the ability to transport those that eat in the presence of the person who has the ability to the place that the food is being eaten from. And it also includes time periods. So if you're eating like, and I don't really talk about it very much, or I don't talk about them at all. There's a group of people who like get weird ass food and extinct food, like they found in ice caps.
There's the whole thing with them like cloning a bunch of animals because they wanted to eat extinct animals.
Yeah, and other questionable things. They pop up a few times. They're central to the plot, but not central enough to really throw into the narrative. The Victulocusaire can also transport you to the time period of the thing that you're eating. So if you're eating, say, honey that was found in a jar in ancient Egypt, it would actually transport you to that time period. It's a really cool power, and I would love to see it explored more. But the guy who, by the way, spoilers to the whole fucking thing.
It's also like at this point, it's almost 10 years done. So,
yeah,
if you really have issues with spoilers that are that far gone, then
Yeah.
I don't know why you're listening to our podcast. I will spoil shit that happened 15 seconds ago.
The thing with the the guy who has that power ends up transporting the guys to the prehistoric past and literally gets killed in the process, to the point where they have to sort of force their way out of the situation. But anyway, the last power that I want to go over, and by the way, like I said, there's like 50 powers in this.
I'm looking at the big list of them, and it's fucking nuts.
It's not the one on Wikipedia, is it? Because there's another one that has all of them.
This is the Doomsbots pod.
Okay, it's the same one I found. Yeah. And I have that bookmarked. I'll actually throw that in the show notes. This is the first time we've had like extensive links in the show notes. The last power is Sebopassim. And the Sebopassim's power is the ability to broadcast a meal as a message to the world, if the power is developed enough. And that becomes very important in a couple of ways. So there's all of these people who have these powers, and some of them are less useful than others. Like there's a dude, I can't remember the name of the power, but there's a dude who his head basically takes on the shape of the food he eats. And he becomes a politician because of it.
Yeah.
There's another guy who has the ability to string guitars with spaghetti noodles.
Isn't there? There's the mayor guy. Isn't there? Doesn't he get have a huge scandal once he has some chicken and his head turns into a giant roast chicken?
Yeah, there's a huge scandal about it, but he comes out of it because towards the end of the comic run, like when it jumps forward, he's like the president of the United States.
Oh,
at the very end.
Yeah.
So we're going to go over the characters and kind of touch on their background and their plot and whatnot. First off, Tony Chu, he's our main protagonist. He is a Sebopath. He gets psychic impressions from the things he eats, with the exception of beets. And beets are almost universal. If someone who has...
It is not like for Tony, it's beets. Because each of them have a different, each Sebopath has a different thing, and Savoy makes that very clear. It makes that very clear because his is persimmons.
Oh well, for the collector, it's also beets, because remember, Antonell eats a shit ton of beets before.
I think that's actually Antonell's. That's Antonell's block. It's Antonell's blocker.
Oh.
And then so the vampire can't get her ability because she basically killed it off. She ate enough beets to make it useless.
Okay, I didn't catch that bit of detail. Which I do remember Savoy mentioning persimmons.
Yeah, that me was actually making that connection like just now, but after the whole thing, particularly towards the end there, like there's a lot of it, because if beets were universal, then there's a big chunk of Savoy's plan at the end that would not have worked. Because he eats all of those beets because they don't affect him. Persimmons kills his power. And I don't think they ever establish what kills Olive's power. But Olive is also powerful enough that it doesn't really matter. She can just power through it.
Yeah.
Like,
anyway, I digress. So, as John pointed out, for Tony it's beets, and Antonell it's beets, which makes sense because they're twins. Yeah. And we'll talk about Antonell here in a minute. If he eats beets, he doesn't get the psychic impressions. When the comic starts, he's a police officer in what is it, Philadelphia?
I think so. Yeah. I think they still have that particular issue that you can just read for free, the very first issue. I don't know where, but we can look and see. Throw that in the notes.
So he starts off as a cop, him and his partner John Colby, but he discovers a serial killer by eating chicken soup contaminated with the killer's blood, when him and his partner are stopped from bringing in a perp they're kind of watching that's going into a chicken speakeasy. I
do have to say, one of my absolute favorite moments, almost in the entire comic, is when they're in the chicken speakeasy, the whole thing, and Tony asks what kind of soup it is. And then the little waiter's like, it's chicken.
Yeah. Like, so the killer has nicked his finger. And there's a little bit of blood in the soup. Tony gets impressions of the people that he's murdered, the women that he's murdered. Him and John like go after him, and John knows about his power, but John hates the fact that he has it.
Well, so does Tony to a certain extent.
Yeah, Tony hates it too. The killer like slices his throat, and then so Tony like start biting.
No, he just like jumps up and just starts gnawing on the dude's face. Like it is, like it's to the point where it's like, because like all the other police are there with their guns, and they're like stop there, da da da. And then Tony has this moment of like, he's gonna die, and we're not gonna know. And there are some of these women that are still alive.
Yeah.
You know what? My career is not worth their lives. And he just like jumps and like, and it literally just jumps and starts like tearing flesh off of his face, like with his teeth. Like it's brutal.
Needless to say,
he loses his job.
Tony's let go from his police job, but he's recruited to the FDA, and he's partnered with Mason Savoy. Mm-hmm. Now, Mason Savoy starts out as Tony's partner in the FDA. He's another Sybopath like Tony. Mm-hmm. And like John said, personyms are what block his power. Mm-hmm.
He's also less powerful, but more knowledgeable. Yes. Because that's something that he says over and over again, because he points out, and he one of the things that Savoy does often in the comic is point out how powerful Tony actually is. Like he's actually an incredibly powerful Sybopath, particularly compared to like any of the others, and that like even down to like the vampire, who's another powerful Sybopath. Like if Tony wanted to go that direction, he would be the same. He'd have the same level. He'd be the same level power, if not more so. And then Savoy makes up for it with just his like the raw knowledge and the amount that he's gained, and the fact that the dude is like a fucking mastermind. Like he is a like and he's able to like play the game, like play the chess game through the whole thing, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. So they start out as partners. Savoy eventually goes rogue. Because Tony discovers that he's been kind of working behind the scenes, that he murdered a food inspector, and that he's kind of been doing some extra legal investigation.
And Tony is a real hard line for the rules. Like
he is.
Like to use like your D&D terms there, he is like a pretty hardcore paladin, and Savoy is a lot more like a rogue or something like that. You know, like he's a lot more morally flexible as long as the goal is noble. Nothing else quite matters to Savoy, which is one of the things that makes him a fucking amazing villain.
Yeah. Savoy basically figures out everything.
Yeah.
He figures out everything, and we'll go over that after we get done talking about the characters. And when he does figure out everything, he gets Tony, who refuses to work with him. Mm-hmm. One, because Savoy like bites off Tony's ear.
Yeah.
Two, Savoy recruits Tony's daughter, Olive, to train her and like help him like do this investigation and fight off the vampire. Tony hates Savoy because of all of this, and he refuses to work with him. So Savoy eventually gets Tony and says, okay, I'm going to show you what's going on. And that's where the Victulo sire comes in, because he basically, they eat like a dinosaur, part of a dinosaur that's been genetically cloned. And he shows them the past where there's this chicken race of
it's like Cro-Magnon chickens.
Like 80 million years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And Tony like is like, okay, that's fucked up, but I still ain't working with you, and leaves Savoy there.
Yeah.
And we'll go over this whole plot here in a minute, but the next person is John Colby. Now, John Colby is Tony's partner. John and Tony have a lot of friction, and John has no food-based powers.
Yeah.
He does have a computer in his head shortly after the starts, and a cybernetic eye.
Yeah. He also has what the hep young kids call the Riz, in that he is incredibly charismatic and basically can work his way into anyone's pants. And does.
Actually, if you actually look at my notes, I comment on that.
Complete slut.
He gets hit in the face with the meat cleaver when they take down their first the serial killer. He doesn't. So John and Colby have kind of a weird relationship because they kind of have a frenemy relationship. But John does respect Tony. He does. Well,
I always got the feeling that like John and Tony would be friends, like legitimate, close, good friends. And I would say by the Tony end would let it happen.
I was going to say, but I think by the end of the comic, they pretty much are.
Yeah, I know. I would say, but you get it like almost from the very beginning. He's like that, but it's like the thing that is stopping them from being actual friends
is Tony.
Yeah. Like John was down like when they met. Like, the only reason I don't like you is you don't like me.
Yeah. John ends up becoming Tony's partner in the FDA after Savoy leaves. And John actually kind of goes to bat. And he's also pansexual. Like he literally just sleep with whoever. Mm-hmm. And he does. Like he sleeps with Mike Appleby.
There's a recurring motif in a panel that is all just directly related to the fact that Colby just got laid.
Yeah.
And the other person is either like confused about what the hell just happened or utterly in love with him now.
Yeah. I have to give him props. Good for him. Good for John Colby.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah.
Yeah. Next up, Mike Appleby. Mike Appleby is the head of the FDA branch that Tony's assigned to. Yep. Appleby hates Tony. Mm-hmm. Hates Tony.
From the moment he met him.
Fun fact, John Layman actually talks about this in their in that interview. He mentions it. Mm. He's like I never intend to explain why Appleby hates Tony. Like never, like, because it's not one of those things where they interact a little bit and my Appleby's like, oh, I don't like this guy. It's like from the very moment Appleby talks to Tony, he's basically like, I hate your fucking face. You're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And so,
well, it almost like, I mean, the one thing I would speculate is I think he has some issue with Sebopaths in general and probably had some, I'm thinking it's probably a carryover. It starts off as a carryover for some kind of hatred of Savoy. And then, and then afterwards it's Tony just perpetually doing the wrong fucking thing.
Yeah. Or at least in Appleby's eyes. But
and honestly, like, I would say that he's doing the wrong. He's doing just like in order to like do well in the bureau. He's doing the wrong. Like Tony is always doing the wrong thing. Like the level of hard, like that whole hardliner thing that he does is not the right call. And in fact, despite the fact that you think that with Appleby that any other person showed that kind of devotion, that kind of moral integrity, the whole thing, he'd be all over it. Mm-hmm. When it's Tony, it's a huge problem. Although, and to be fair, and this is something I'm going to go into again later, like With Tony, it is always a problem. Like Tony's love of the law or inability to break the law, is what destroys him. I mean, is all of it, like so many of his problems are created explicitly by the fact that he cannot back down. He can't just go, you know what? I'm just going to pretend this didn't happen today. Or I'm going to ignore this one.
So Applebee's hatred of Tony basically makes it so he finds the worst cases and the grossest things for Tony to eat during those investigations.
Yeah.
Now, Applebee has no powers. And eventually he does end up in a long-term relationship and married to John Colby. He's later on, he's bisected during a raid against the vampire/collector.
Yeah.
And he has his lower half replaced with a robotic horse torso.
Another of my favorite little motifs that they keep coming back to over and over again is there's this little thing where it's like in 20 years or whatever. It's like the little thing there, and it will pop up, and it's usually always like Applebee looking at Tony and saying, I hate you. And it's usually after him saying like he's never going to like you. And it's like 40 years in the future, fucking hate you. But they start to do it where like every time they jump ahead, like Applebee's has a different lower half. Like you see, he's got a giant spider lower half. He's got a centaur body. He's got a kangaroo lower half. He's, like every time it's a different thing. And it's, And the cybernetics, I believe, were a gift from the USDA, who does cybernetics instead of superpowers.
Yeah, which we're not going to go into much here.
Yeah,
too much,
they're kind of more a side thing. Like them and NASA, they are important, but they're not like main plot important.
Yeah. The next character is Amelia Mintz. She's a food critic at the local newspaper and a Savile scrivener, who also eventually becomes a Savile conscribo.
Yeah, but that's like way down the line.
Yeah.
After I eat a bunch of Gallup berries.
When we're first introduced to her, she's been writing about high-end restaurants, but she'd gotten bored with that and started writing about the worst restaurants in the city. And she ends up giving a huge portion of the city food poisoning because her power gives people the sensation of eating food.
Yeah, and it's to make a point to her boss. Where she's like, I'm done with this there. I want to do real journalism. Whole thing. They're like, why would we like, you have this amazing ability. Why would we waste you on anything but the whole fine dining thing? Like people, I mean, you literally sell papers on your own. And she's like, oh, okay. And so she goes to every nasty, horrid dive. There's one that's just like it's a sushi restaurant that's a front for the Yakuza. So the food has just been sitting there for like months.
Because they, as the guy says, we don't expect anyone to come in and buy this. You'd know that if you were actually a crook when Tony goes in to investigate them.
Yeah. Well, and then she gets them to eat, and they're just like, I think at first, if I remember correctly, they're just like, no, like, what the hell? The hell's wrong with you?
There's an island a small island that has this fruit called the gallsberry that's from another planet. She ends up stealing one of the gallsberries and bringing it back and starts eating it. And as she eats it, she begins to hallucinate about a far off planet and writing down what she sees in the visions.
I don't know if you said this here, but one of the things and the reasons why the gallopsberry is being as widely grown as it is, there is something to be said that it does change or enhance the powers of any of these sort of people with the food powers. That's one of the things that the gallopsberries do. But the reason why people are making it is because when you cook it, it tastes like chicken, but it's not chicken. So it's legal.
As she goes on and writes this about this story. She slowly becomes a sabos conscribo by eating this, and she publishes a whole bunch of novels, which unfortunately the last one never gets released because it's stolen by Savoy.
Yeah, that's by the way, and then the one she writes to replace it is written exclusively for Tony, and so it's not exactly like a big revelation or anything. It doesn't like fix the story there. It's just
so next up, and I actually thought about whether or not to include him, but I felt he was important enough that I really like this character, D-Bear or Deshaun Barry.
Fucking D-Bear.
He's a criminal, and he's actually the guy that John Colby and Tony are watching when the comic starts. He starts out running chicken for chicken speakeasies and stuff, but he's also an informant for the FDA.
Yeah, and he's specifically been an informant for Savoy for a long time.
Yeah. He eventually goes legit, and he actually becomes an FDA agent, and is teamed up with Tony and Cesare Valenzano and Colby various times after the FDA goes after the vampire. When they go after the vampire, a whole bunch of them are wiped out, and they basically pull in
literally anyone with any kind of connection there. I think, that's also the point where you get where the USDA gets a little bit of a surge in power.
So D-Bear, he doesn't have any powers, but he actually does become a fairly decent investigator.
Yeah.
By the end of the comic run,
and he does actually, and he's also one where he knows how all of the things work. He knows how all the criminal agencies function, and he knows and he
also knows how all the criminal networks function because he's a criminal.
Yeah.
So, I actually really I really got to the point where I just I love D-Bear. He's fun. Next up, Pollo.
El Pollo.
Pollo is a killer chicken from Yamopala that is just a badass.
Yeah.
There's never a legitimate reason why he's such a badass.
There are many. There's a couple of times they put entire side comics devoted just to explaining.
There are 3 issues of the side comic.
Yeah, 3 issues of the side comic that is all just explaining why Pollo is just badass. And eventually in the actual mainline plot, you learn why. You actually learn why. And it is the simplest thing in the world, which makes it all the cooler to me. He's just
I must have missed it because what? I never saw why
he's just really angry.
Oh.
That's all it is. That's why they have to that's why they have to do the whole thing of Tony has to eat him in that whole bit there, is because Tony's gonna back off, he's gonna flinch, he's gonna do that there, but with the raw rage of Pollo boiling through him, he'll be able to defeat the vampire. But it's he is just really fucking angry. And that's the fact, and there's all these jokes that aren't necessarily entirely jokes, about, Pollo just beating ass and fighting kaiju and all sorts of stuff where he's just running around, just doing he is there's a point where he is dropped in a box where they make you think for an entire almost an entire issue, possibly more than one issue, that within this box there's a bomb, a nuke is somewhere in there. And you know what's in that box? Pollo. That's it. And he is as efficient. Well, he's more efficient and as destructive as a nuke because he's just fucking Pollo, and he is that goddamn angry.
Yeah. Pollo's great.
Yeah, Pollo's the best. I have a literal stuffed Pollo. I have a
I want to get one of those.
It makes me happy. So bad. I need to get one of the chogs.
Yeah, that'd be cool too. Next up, Cesar Valenzano. He's an an FDA agent. He's initially in deep cover. He's been put in deep cover by Savoy, doing some investigation for this company. And I know I have the guy's name somewhere in this massive document, but I don't have it where I should. He eventually does come back to the FDA after Tony and has a whole Yamopolythene incident, and he's teamed up with a dude that just all he does is eat and then recite the ingredients of the shit that he eats.
He's like, well, and Applebee's like, I don't need you anymore. I got a new food, weirdo. And it's just like it's just him listing ingredients that he tastes, which is not the same as fucking sebopathy.
No, in fact, that's all he does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally all he does.
Well, I think anyway, there is one, I think there's a couple of times you see him like do like small, officer or small like agent stuff.
It's actually after the raid on the vampire collector's base.
That makes sense.
Because something happens then that like fucks up his power and he becomes a little bit more normal. But it's never explored.
Yeah, but there's also a bit in those last two that you lent me where Seabear starts to eat Seabear just kind of has some kind of breakdown, starts eating the cheese puffs and listing the ingredients, and he just the guy just like pops up going like it's like,
well, Seabear's reading the ingredients off of the nutrition thing because
I'm like I believe you're right, but I am going to since I literally have the comics right here. I am going to check on that point because I just need to see if I missed it. I was reading it, or if there was.
Yeah, but while you're looking, so Caesar he does come back to the FDA. He still works with Savoy. He's still pretty loyal to Savoy, and he helps recruit Olive Chew, Tony's daughter, to Savoy's thing. During the raid against the vampire collector, and we keep throwing his name out, and we haven't talked about him yet. He's maimed and he loses an arm, which is replaced with a lobster claw, a robotic lobster claw,
which is just pretty badass.
Yeah.
Okay, it is from the picture in here. It is legitimately unclear because D-Bear is holding the bag the way the other dude does. But it could be folded. It could be folded forward slightly so we can read it. But you also can't see, like, you can't see where his eyes are. You can't, it's one of those.
So
like,
it's
either of our interpretations are equally valid because there's no way to confirm either one.
And seeing that, and the reason I got the impression I did is because D-Bear had never shown or never had any powers mentioned. And so my assumption was that he was just reading the label.
Yeah, my assumption wasn't necessarily that it was the powers, that he like getting the powers or anything, but that he had it, and then he just sort of like zoned out and started to, because the one guy who I don't know if they make it clear if he has any powers, frankly, because they are usually really good at specifying when somebody has abilities.
It says, I think it does hint that he does have abilities, or it does.
I know. Well, my point is that this is not a comic that hints about that. If somebody has powers, they make it really fucking clear.
I think he does have powers because I think it basically states that he has powers. It just never names what the powers is because they're completely functionless. Because Peter Pilaf, who we're not going to really talk about, has powers. But it explicitly states that his powers are unknown, and the other guy's powers are essentially useless.
I think the unknown, the Peter Pilaf, they do specify that each time that he dies, his powers come back in a new form, more powerful.
Yeah,
but so it's
But anyway, I digress. We should move on. Chow Chew. Chow Chew's Tony's older brother, who is a celebrity chef. He hates the Chicken Man. and is convinced that there is a massive conspiracy behind it, and he's absolutely right. That's what Savoy's initially investigating. He detests Tony because Tony is a cop and so straight-laced and bound by the rules. He doesn't have any stated powers, and this is going back to what you said. There are hints that he might have something related to cooking chicken, but it's never explicitly stated. So
yeah, well, and I think, and at least for my money, him, just like the idea that he's just a really good and incredibly arrogant chef, I think works the best in that regard.
Yeah. Though there is something to be said about him being able to cook pollo after pollo's been sitting in a garbage can for a week.
Yeah.
And making it palatable enough that Tony could eat the entire bird.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I digress. Chow's important to the plot, and mostly because he's another Chew, and he ends up cooking pollo for Tony. Tony Chew, which is actually Tony's twin sister Antonelle, is a voyant. She can see the future of any living thing that she eats. She's an astronomer and a scientist. She works at NASA, and she initially working at. There's 3 telescopes that are all pointed to this planet called Altilis 738. Mm-hmm. She's working at one of these telescopes, and those telescopes have this massive funding, like 30 times over budget or 20 times over budget than what they actually need. So basically, all of the scientists end up just partying the entire time because they have all this extra money to spend. Mm-hmm. The one that she worked at was in the Amazon rainforest, and she basically, them and her fellow scientists basically just spend all their time consuming hallucinogenic frogs and fucking each other because, let's be honest, you have all your needs taken care of because you're a scientist working in a giant telescope, and can you spend your money doing whatever? That's probably what you'd do.
Yeah. Well, particularly when it's like, particularly when they just keep looking at it and going, fuck, we don't know. Like, shit, what the hell do you want from us?
Yeah.
Infinite money and an impossible task.
Yeah, the planet Antilles 738 has this strange skywriting that appears over it, and eventually it blows up. It happens a couple times, and eventually it blows up. And then the Earth has this skywriting that appears over it, and it lasts for months and months. I get the impression it's like 6 months or almost a year, the skywriting, the first set of skywritings over the world. Yeah. And once that skywriting comes over it, the government shifts its budget from the FDA to NASA, and so it becomes more powerful than the FDA. And Tony becomes a special agent more than she is a scientist. Because of her power, she's kidnapped by the vampire collector, who wants her ability. He's going around eating people with food-based powers. She foils him by consuming beets for days, and as John pointed out earlier,
it's all under the guise of preparing for her wedding to her supervisor,
Sharma.
Yeah, Dharma, who, or Paneer, I think, maybe
Paneer Sharma.
Sharma, yeah, who is like so obviously like stupid in love with her from like the moment he's first introduced.
Yeah.
But it's
but she bites Paneer. She bites him once, and he's like freaks out and like, why the fuck would you do that? And then he's still like kind of in love. He's still in love with her.
Yeah.
And so they end up back together, and she bites him. She's like, I need to bite you to see how things are going to turn out. And he's like, okay. And she bites him. When she bites him, that's when she realizes that she's going to die.
Well,
and she sees him mourning her grave.
The way they do it, like visually, is pretty sweet because they have her like she's facing him, and she has this like bright smile and is telling him how great everything's going to be, and then he moves into a hug so that he can't see her face anymore, and she has this look of utter horror at what's going to happen, like at what's going to happen to everybody there, but also what the vampire is going to do to her.
Yeah. And so she's kidnapped by the vampire and slowly consumed by him and like dismembered by him. And because she ate beets for like weeks, he can't absorb her power. She foils him with consuming of beets. Eventually, she kind of taunts him, and eventually he just snaps her neck and kills her when he realizes that what she's done. Basically.
Yeah, made it so that she can't, so that he will never be able to get her abilities.
And then Olive Chew is the teen daughter of Tony's, who's raised by his sister Rosemary.
It was from like his first girlfriend, who
/ wife.
His first wife, who just like completely lost it.
She had if I remember correctly, she had a brain tumor.
Yeah, she had a brain tumor, but she went like that wasn't revealed until after she'd like completely destroyed her and Tony's life. With like just complete problems.
But Olive is also a SIBOpath, and as John put it, and the one note that he put in this episode script.
Well, it was a big script, and I'm like, I'll just interject like I normally do.
Yeah, and it worked. It worked well. Yeah. And what is she? What is she, John? She's a SIBOpath.
Is the most powerful SIBOpath of all of them. She's the most powerful SIBOpath on the planet. She's stronger than the vampire. She's stronger than Tony. She's stronger than Savoy. And unlike Tony, she was actually willing to take some of Savoy's training. So she has a greater understanding of how to use her SIBOpathic abilities than her father does. Like Tony is still an incredibly powerful SIBOpath, but she is like we don't know what her limiting food is because she's strong enough she can just ignore it. She can also just ignore. She can also just turn her power off whenever she wants.
Yeah, that's how strong she is.
Yeah, she can turn her power off. She can turn off her weakness. Her weakness there. Like was it? There's a line that Savoy says where it's like, what would take you a drop of blood would take me a bite. Would take you a bite would take me an entire arm. What would take you like an arm I would have to eat the entire body for. And that's just talking to Chew. And then with Olive, like there are things where she has gained like full on, like, and in some ways enhanced versions of these pretty powerful abilities. She's the one who gains the shaping the chocolate. She can turn tortillas into throwing stars. Yeah.
I don't put that in there. I mean, it's cool, but at the same time,
but eventually once you see like in like there's some bits that you see her in the future, like she's able to the point where those like tortilla throwing stars are made of metal. They're not just sharp tortillas or anything there. Like it's literally legitimate metal that she's transformed them into.
Yeah.
Like, but she can do that just with like a teeny little nibble. She can gain an entire ability.
She's able to get it just from them mixing some of the blood, just some blood of the into like milkshakes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Which you actually see Caesar, like some of the people they take down or get killed that are powerful, they actually see Caesar like gathering up blood and stuff for them, or letting that Savoy know that, hey, we just got this guy. Yeah. And Colby actually figures it out. But Olive is recruited by Savoy, one, to be trained, but also to help him investigate the chicken ban and the bird flu and what's going on. And it's sort of, once Antonelle gets killed by the collector, she refocuses on taking out the vampire and collector, which we've been Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, but one of the things with Olive, and is that Olive, particularly at that point, she is incredibly powerful, but she's not ready.
No, which brings us to the vampire collector. The vampire collector is a Serbian SIBOpath who uses the myth of the vampire, and this is why we call it the vampire collector. Uses the myth of the vampire to inspire fear in people. He's created a network of spies to help him locate and find other people with food powers. so he can kidnap them and eat them in order to absorb their powers.
And he has and Tony like a hella sweet, like a terrifying group of powers.
Yeah,
and like given a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Foreshadowing. Not foreshadowing. Like him knowing beforehand. A little bit of foreknowledge. Yeah, we're given the vampire a little bit of foreknowledge, and he's basically unstoppable. Like he's an utterly terrifying combatant, which is why Tony, who would not be strong enough otherwise, has to eat Pollo.
Yeah. So Mason and Tony first encounter his spies when they go to the telescope up in the Arctic to investigate this death of Senator Hamantashen.
Yeah.
Tony first encounters him in Yamapala, and where the vampire's there to get the chef Fantanieros. And that brings us to the story arcs. So there's 3 major story arcs. There's the vampire collector going around and collecting things. He becomes a foil. There is the bird flu, and the chicken ban.
Yeah.
And then there's the galsberry fruit being on Yamapala. And they all come together at the end. And I'm going to go over them each real quick. The bird flu, it raged through the world, killing 116 million people, over 20 million in the U.S. The government banned chicken and poultry, which has created a massive black market. And it causes the FDA to become the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country, with the USDA just behind them. There's a lot of people that are convinced that there's more to conspiracy, and there's something that the government's done that is inexplicable, like why this happened. Mason Savoy's wife actually dies from the flu, which crushes him. And there's a company called Montanero, and after he eats some of one of their thugs, he figures out that this company Montanero, and the businessman, that's the businessman I was trying to remember earlier, Caesar's working for, at deep cover for. But once he eats some of this guy that works for Montanero, he figures out that there is this conspiracy of the bird flu, and so it leads him to start investigating it, and which eventually leads him to go rogue, to figure out what's going on with these 3 telescopes, why there's these food-based powers in the collector. That conspiracy also drives some terrorist organizations. The main one, which is EGG, which is E.G.G, to acts of terrorism and assassination, and they keep popping up, and they're almost all of their shit's foiled.
Was it the Church of the Immaculate Ova?
They are eventually, yes. Yeah. I mean, not initially, because it doesn't exist when you're first introduced to them.
Yeah.
Then there's like a vampire collector conspiracy, and as I mentioned, he's a Serbian Cevopath. Him going after these food-based powers, and I never saw what exactly. It just seemed like he just wanted to be like ruler of the world or something like that.
I think he just kind of wanted the power. He just wanted the power.
Yeah,
there.
he just wants the power
because there's a little bit, because when like right before Tony's about to do the killing blow, and he's just like, and basically the vampire's mocking him, because it's like you're going to eat me, and then I'm going to live forever in you, like in you, and then the Cevopath that eats you, and then like the whole thing, and like there, and then Tony, who is just kicked the shit out of him using Pollo's anger, just walks off, just leaves him to die, and then the guy freaks out. So I think it was something like I don't remember if it was explicitly said, but it came off to me he had got it into his head that this was his purpose, His purpose was to gather these to gain the power, and then eventually have that kind of combatant and now it's more like I need you to defeat me, and then you're going to defeat me, and I'm going to live as a fucking legend because you're going to go on and do amazing things with these powers I've gathered.
Yeah.
But so it's I don't think he had a specific goal. He had a philosophical stance that he was supporting.
Him going after people eventually leads to a lot of the Food Peace people going in hiding with the cult, the divinity of the Immaculate Ova, which we'll talk about in a second. He does eventually kidnap Antonelle, Tony's twin sister, and tries to eat her, which him killing her is what leads Olive to go along with Savoy.
Yeah.
And it also leads Colby to share the fact that he's been working with Savoy and Caesar's been working with Savoy, brings this information to Appleby and them to basically make a strike team to go after the Collector, which completely decimates the FDA, kills a whole bunch of people, maims Caesar and Appleby, basically makes Savoy more of an enemy of Tony than before. And it like you said, it makes it so Tony has to eat pollo, which is revealed to him. So Antonelle leaves her toe for Tony to eat. There's a whole big thing. There's not enough of it. They end up having to eat some Galsberry fruit to help amplify what's there. But she eventually reveals to Tony that he has to eat pollo, which, fun fact, John Colby also realizes.
Beforehand,
beforehand. Like Tony knows before John does, but Tony doesn't reveal it to anyone. And John's actually the person who kills Pollo.
And it's one of those where the way Pollo dies comes off as very anticlimactic. But I think there's actually the one of the Pollo in Hell, the last one of those, the one that said you were kind of lukewarm on. I think that's fair. It one thing that one does that actually. It's not canon in what happens, but does explain the emotionality. John Colby is able to kill Pollo because Pollo trusted John Colby.
Yeah,
Pollo implicitly trusted John Colby, and so that's why he's able to just snap his neck.
Yeah, and John regrets it. He hates that he had to do it, but he realizes it's the only way that Tony can fight the Collector.
It kind of gives some weight to how he ends up in the comic,
which we'll
I know
don't spoil it before the end of a podcast where we spoil the fuck out
before we spoil it.
But he does end up Tony does end up fighting the Collector after he eats Pollo and Chow cooks Pollo and then just leaves him to rot. Then the next one, the alien plant conspiracy. So there's this plant called the Galsberry, which looks a lot like the eggs from the Alien movie.
Kinda, yeah. If that a pineapple and one of those rotten flesh flowers with the weird little tentacle things, if they all sort of were thrown in a blender, I think that's what a Galsberry would look like. Yeah. And as I said before, Galsberry is wildly grown and it became a cash crop there because when cooked, it tastes like chicken.
It tastes like chicken. Yep. Fun fact, there's a huge rebellion though, and they kill most of them off during that rebellion. Not all of them. There's some of them that make it off the island.
Yeah.
Which is important because on one of the boats, there's this woman, who we kind of probably should have talked about. Where is Alania Adobo? So she's working on the island. She ends up eating a whole bunch of them, creating the Church of the Immaculate Ova. Yeah. When the skywriting shows up, so some of the plants get off the island. Amelia Mintz takes one and is able to plant it in her flower box and in her apartment. After making the discovery, the skywriting appears over the planet. And like I said earlier, it lasts for like 6 months, a year.
Mm-hmm.
The time is a little bit ambiguous.
Yeah.
But it does last months. It is very much months that it lasts. It's the same kind of writing that appeared over the planet of Antilles 738 that NASA was pointing those telescopes to. It eventually disappears, and some years go by. Things kind of get back to normal to a point. During that time, the skywriting is up. The ban on chicken is sort of not laxed, but it's sort of
generally ignored.
Not as enforced. Yeah.
I'd say it's just sort of ignored. Like it's not, I would even say unenforced. It's just nobody kind of gives a shit.
Yeah. Once the skywriting disappears after some time, it kind of goes back to normal. It's not as forced as strictly anymore, but Amelia starts consuming the plant and having these vivid waking dreams about a detective on an alien planet, which is what she uses for her series of novels that she begins writing, that Savoy ends up stealing the last manuscript of. And the two, well, even all three plot lines, sub-arcs, are sort of related, because the powers are related in the vampire collecting them. So over the course of this, Savoy's investigation, you discover there's a small cabal of people that, once the planet Antilles 738 has been discovered, they figure out that the skywriting over the planet is a warning to that planet to let citizens know to stop eating chicken. They develop a conspiracy to create the bird flu using the Cibopassim to broadcast this idea of it and killing people so they can ban chicken. Now, it doesn't explore a lot of what the rest of the world is doing other than Yamapala, but the U.S. government seems to be the one that is most aggressive about banning chicken. The people with powers that eat the Galsberry fruit, specifically Cibopass, they realize that it's from this planet Antilles 738. This leads to Alani Adobo, who I mentioned above, who's from Yamampala and escapes on a boat during the uprising there, to eat a whole bunch of this fruit. And while she's on the boat, the skywriting appears, and as she's eating it, she basically figures out what the skywriting is, which is a warning to the planet saying, hey, stop eating chicken or we're going to destroy your planet. Yeah. Which leads her to create the Church of...
I think there's this whole thing about the difference between destruction and judgment. It's like they're not just going to be destroyed, like they will be judged.
And this leads her to create the Church of the Immaculate Ova, who have one message. And what is that message, John? What is a single message from the church?
Chicken is doom.
Yes.
There's also there's this whole thing about it having two possible translations. One is chicken is doom, and the other is we are coming. It's we are coming. Yeah, it's we are like chicken is like the two interpretations are we are coming and chicken is death.
Yeah, because they end up setting up their headquarters back on Yamampala, and because of the collector's aggressive pursuit of people with food powers, a lot of them flee to Yamampala to basically hide out from him, but they also end up becoming members of the cult. Savoy figures out through his course of his investigations that there was this group of people who figured out what happened to Antilles 738, which is why they engineered the bird flu. He also figures out that the aliens that created the skywriting over Antilles 738 also sent the message to our planet, and that Amelia herself is having visions of Antilles 738, which is what her novels have been about, and that she may have figured out the solution to Earth's predicament in that last transcript, which he takes and just reads, absorbs, and destroys. He reveals all of this to Tony. Tony refuses to work with him.
Yeah.
And then Savoy eats a whole bunch of Galsberry with beet juice in it, and then kills himself and has Tony eat him.
Because he knows that if Tony tries, it'll be uncomfortable. But if he tries, he can get over the fact that there's the beet stuff. And also, with the beats there, Tony won't be able to sort of like skip over any of the stuff that Savoy needs to say.
And the Galsberry allows Savoy to talk directly to Tony. So another thing that Savoy reveals to Tony is that food-based powers exist to allow them to curtail the Earth's destruction.
Yeah.
After he reveals that these aliens are originally from Earth millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of years ago. And he shows to Tony that he needs two powers to stop the aliens from destroying the Earth. The first is the Sebopasm, which is the broadcasting. And the other is a Saboconscribo, an enhanced version of that, which is the ability to weave food into fiction or flavors into fiction. Savoy consumes the Sebopasm guy after basically sending Tony on this excursion to Yamopala.
I actually love how that plays out, because Savoy's like, you're going to absorb this power. You're like, this is what's going to happen. You're going to absorb this power.
You have to do it.
You have to do it. Like, you have to do it. There is no other choice. And then Tony, being his complete oppositional defiance, fuck you, goes there to try and save the guy, and he's already been eaten. And so Savoy's like, yeah, you're going to absorb his powers because you already have.
Yeah.
Like, you got those when you ate me.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah. So good.
It's great. The other ability is the Saboconscribo, which is what Amelia has.
Yeah.
And basically Savoy tells Tony, you have to eat Amelia. And Tony doesn't like that. Time jumps forward again a couple years. By this time, Olive is working as a FDA agent, or starting as
she's either a junior agent or an agent in training. She's working in the
her partner.
Her partner is basically just like somebody she got stuck with initially on this job here, who apparently has an actual ability.
She does. It's actually named.
Yeah, it's actually a named ability where as long as she eats something psychedelic, she's like physically indestructible.
Yeah, it's like literally she has to be stoned as
fuck, and it has to be something that it has to be stoned because of something that she's like eaten. Eaten or related along those there, and the way they handle it is actually really great. Is a little like kind of this little montage there, because they start off with Olive being like, I am not working with her. She is not my partner. I am never working with her. And then they do a montage of them over like the next 20 years, like being this like kind of badass team together with the combination of Olive's abilities and her abilities. Like, yeah, it's a great little moment of levity in something that kind of needs it at this point, because it's starting to get like I think the big turnaround is when it starts to get dark is when you get the image of Amelia dead in Tony's arms.
After Savoy reveals that Tony will have to eat Amelia, time jumps forward a few years. The skywriting is back, and Tony knows that this skywriting is only a 24-hour warning. And he's endeavors to basically, he knows it's like the Earth's last day, so he wants to focus all of his attention on Amelia, and have fun together. But he ends up getting called into work and doing a bunch of bullshit. And eventually he basically says, Savoy told me I have to eat you. And she's like, well, okay. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. And then he explains to her what happens, what the reason why. is so he can use her ability to like broadcast this theme to kill all the chicken eaters.
And that, and that she is, and also that she's not ready. Like her
she's not ready. But one thing that happens is she basically sits down. She's like, "Well, you never talked to me about it, Tony." And after he goes to sleep, she sits down and she does it. She like basically forces that ability. It writes the piece of fiction that will kill all of the people who've had chicken in their system and dies. Shortly after that, Tony's holding her. The last time you get this image of him holding her dead body, Colby shows up and basically takes Tony out to like capture this dude who's been frying and eating people. There's no powers. He's just a cannibal. Like, which is, I think, the first time you see that.
Yeah.
Like, just a legitimate, like, psychopathic cannibal who's
like
not doing it because
like a free TA or something. It's like, he's somebody who fries foods. Like, okay, well, what's his power? Like, no power. He just fries.
He's a cannibal.
He's just a cannibal that fries people.
Colby convinces Tony to do it. He's basically like, you got to do this, dude. It's the only way to save the world. And because writing it killed Amelia, after Tony reads it, basically millions of people all over the world die because they've just eaten chicken, including Colby and D-Bear. It actually shows D-Bear dying as well.
Yeah. I just checked the timeline there, and when they go to grab the guy, like to save the guy from Savoy, the broadcaster.
Yeah.
Tony says clearly that the end of the world is Wednesday. So there's no big amount of time at all between those two things. Like it's days, which is why she doesn't have time, because he said like it would take days, weeks, months in order to get her to have the ability, the ability safely, and why when she just like reaches down deep and like yanks it up, which is what kills her.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the timeline is actually really tight, which is why
I didn't. That's not the impression I get. I mean, I believe you just read it, but I did not get that impression.
Yeah, no, I got that they were. I got that they were on a very tight timetable, like from the very beginning there.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Everybody with chicken in their system dies, and the skywriting disappears. Now we jump ahead several decades.
Yes.
Tony's clearly in his 70s or 80s. So is Appleby and Cesar. The world's become this crazy base. There's even more food-based powers. There's food technology. The aliens that initially sent the skywriting have started sharing their technology, and there's been some dialogue between them, their world and ours. They're headed to Earth for their first visit. And Tony, Appleby, and Cesar, as well as Sharma and a few others, and the president, who's the food dude, are all in attendance at Area 51 to meet the aliens. Olive and Chow are back home. Olive is a secret agent. Olive and Chow are back home. And they realize that Tony took the chocolate dagger that Olive carved for him to kill the collector with.
Yeah.
And when the aliens land and the lead alien gets off the ship, Tony pushes past everybody and stabs him in the heart. That is how the comic ends.
Which is, yeah. And the one that he had been planning since before the comic existed. Like that image, that moment was the seed from which the entire comic grew.
Yeah.
And
so,
yeah,
we're not going to go into final thoughts. Talk about themes a little bit. Obviously, John, I want you to go over the revelation that you had while reading this about the nature of the story itself.
One of the things that I realized looking through it is, I expected a comic, like kind of a comic story, or like a quirky comic story moving forward, that you would get some kind of complicated happy ending is what is.
Yeah. I expected the same thing.
That's basically what we expected there. But the problem that occurred for both of us, and I think and I would imagine a lot of people that read this comic, is they didn't realize the kind of story that they were actually reading.
Yeah, John Layman was not telling what people thought he was telling.
This story is a Grecian tragedy, like from the very onset. Like even like the fact Tony chews like complete adherence to the law to the point of psychosis.
Hey, will you go for real briefly explain what a Grecian tragedy is?
Okay, a Grecian tragedy, like there's in your Greek story structures, in your old ones, they're like most things boil down to either comedy or tragedy. There are a few things that are always the case there, like comedies end in chaos or begin in chaos and end in order, and tragedies begin in order and end in chaos. Examples of tragedies you like the people might know. We're going real highbrow right now, which is weird after seeing a chicken man stabbed to death. But go like any of your story, like your Oedipus Rex, your Macbeth is a prime example of a tragedy there, where at the beginning everything is it's either good or at least it's like structured. It's gonna be like everything's okay. It's gonna be nice there, and then as things move forward, they start to break apart. It's the opposite of that comedic, where comedic like starts completely crazy, like everything's nuts, but by the end, there's sort of there's just a new equilibrium, like a new setup. And that's kind of the core difference between those, which I bring up because those two are so intrinsically tied that you can't really talk about one without talking about the other. There are a few things about a tragedy that are unique. One thing that always shows up is that the hero of a tragic piece has a tragic flaw, that there is some aspect of himself that he cannot change that is the source of many, if not all, of his problems, and and in time can destroy his ultimate, like his ultimate goals.
Yeah,
I mean,
and in Tony's case, it's his adherence to the rules.
Adherence to the rules, and then his like complete obstinance about doing it, like because he is like he's in your face about I'm following the fucking rules. Shut the fuck up. There you go. Fuck off. Like it's a psychotic. It's a near psychotic need for him to do that, and that's what makes his thing, his whole deal, a tragic flaw. And the other thing that happens with tragedies is a lot of characters that are very important both to the hero and to the audience die. That they die, and usually it's because either they refuse, like their tragic flaw leads them to do it, or they are being punished by the gods for something that they've done there. And if you listen through what I just said there's a lot of this that applies directly to Tony. Like to Tony, like the fact that Tony adamantly refused to work with Savoy in any way, even in the end, even towards the end, is proof of that tragic flaw, because you can you sort of see, particularly as Savoy reveals more things, that it would not have been as bad. It wouldn't, like, there might have been ways to get around it. There might have been ways to work with it. Like Amelia may not have had to die if they'd had his knowledge in full. Or at least
not even just that. It's entirely possible had he started working with Savoy or had continued to work with Savoy, his twin sister Antonelle would have died.
Yeah, there's a lot, like Antonelle would have survived. Like Savoy would still have been in the FDA had those resources not had to be scavenged. He wouldn't have he wouldn't have to bite off Tony's ear. He wouldn't have to have secretly corrupted Olive. I mean, all of the problems that Tony has are either of his own creation or extensions of his mistakes and who he is as a person.
Yeah. And that's the thing is this ending sort of the culmination of him kind of realizing that.
Yeah.
And more to the point, him getting revenge on
you can't really blame him, because not only was he forced to watch the only person, like one of like three people that he loved die, but also
he's forced to kill like a huge
chunk he's forced to kill millions of people because these fucking alien bastards would kill everyone over it because of the chicken thing.
Yeah.
Like, and a lot of those are things that, like, that seems like a conversation, like from like a perspective of me thinking about these aliens, that seems like a discussion that you ought to have in person, not through not through fucking giant skywriting and then blowing like vague statements and then blowing people the fuck up. Like, that seems a little.
One thing that I ponder. Mm-hmm. Is one, how many planets out there have some form of chicken on them?
Yeah.
The aliens on those planets started eating. And how many planets did these aliens blown up?
Yeah.
We know of one, Antilles 738. But how many other planets?
Well, I think that there's something, at one point they said that there's like 3 or 4 that they saw, or they think they saw on the with the writing, but that's that was not the case there, and a lot of the NASA stuff, they weren't actually watching there at the moment because, well, they're busy fucking each other and
drinking and partying.
Yeah, and spending more money than God on the ultimate parties. Because
if I don't blame him.
I mean, it's like okay, you've been given an impossible goal, a literally impossible goal.
And more money
than God. Like, there's comes. It's like, well, what the fuck do you want us to do? Like,
yeah,
like we're just gonna hang out. We're just gonna party.
Yeah, I mean, it would have a slightly different form. Yeah. Like, I'm sure there'd be board games and tabletop RPGs involved, but still lots of hallucinogens and sex. So, one other thing about beyond the Greek tragedy, obviously vengeance. There at the very end, vengeance is one of those things. Actually, vengeance is kind of a predominant theme throughout, because you have Olive wanting to get revenge against the Collector. Tony wanting to get revenge against the Collector.
Well, a lot of it is Tony wanting to get revenge against Savoy, like in that.
And Savoy, and Savoy wanting to get revenge against the U.S. government for creating the bird flu.
Yeah.
I mean, vengeance
which is another thing. Like, vengeance and how it leads towards destruction is another one of those things that shows up in those whole Grecian tragedy things. Like, this is a, like, you could get in your professor's, like in your English or your theater professor's face and say, like, no, okay, I'm going to read this comic, I'm going to read this bunch of comics, and I'm going to write my dissertation or my paper on how this is a perfect Greek tragedy, and you're going to let me do it.
Yeah. The last big thing, like most obvious thing, because like I say, we never go super deep, is utilitarianism. The idea that the moral outcome should benefit the majority of the group and not the... And it's very much like comes to play at the very end when basically Tony kills a huge chunk of the planet to save the rest of humanity.
Yeah.
I don't want to dive deep into it. Utilitarianism is such a large.
I do, however, love like the we don't like to go deep here, but utilitarianism.
Utilitarianism. So basically, the sum it up, Spock's, the good of the many outweigh the benefits for the few.
Yeah.
And Colby actually, and both Colby and Amelia kind of push this, and they both die because of it, because Amelia basically reaches deep inside her and brings out this power and it kills her. And then Colby convinces Tony to do this, even though he knows that when Tony does it, he's going to die because he had chicken and waffles that morning for breakfast.
Yeah. Well, and even Antonella, Antonelle, like even her, like she goes out of her way to create a situation where she's going to be useless to the collector, because that is one of the only ways that they're going to get through to Tony, so that he can actually stop him. Like. Yeah. Everybody, everybody with the exception of like fucking Appleby is like has some hardcore utilitarian stances.
Yeah. But first off, what's next for Chew? John Layman has released a second series, at least 2 arcs of a second series called Chew, which is spelled CHU, which follows an unbefore-seen sister, Saffron, who is a twin to one of Tony's other sisters that we didn't mention, named Sage. She's a criminal. She's part of a seedy underworld of criminals and crooks and thieves. The story focuses on her. She's a central character, and it's set back when Tony is a cop, before he joins the FDA. He does this comic with artist Dan Boltwood, who has a style that is a little more Saturday morning cartoonish, but it's still kind of reminiscent of Rob Guillory's art style. So it's not jarring to see it. Like I said, there's 2 arcs. There's 2 5-issue arcs. They're both collected in trades. And at the moment, it appears to be on kind of a permanent hiatus. John Layman's also said he wants to do a Chew 2 that follows Olive and her partner, but he wants Rob Guillory to be available to do that. And right now, Rob Guillory's tied up with a comic called Farmhand. And I don't know much about it. I haven't actually looked into it, but so he's working on that. There were, at one point, there were 2 separate TV series as well as a movie supposed to be adapted for this.
I'm still angry and bitter about the one of them.
Yeah, the one was going to be awesome. It was going to be animated. It had Felicia Day cast as Amelia Mintz.
They had David Tennant as Savoy. Like, yeah,
it had a lot of potential. Both of those are pretty much dead, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, they're
maybe someday with the success of The Boys, the Umbrella Academy, and a few of those. I mean, possible. It's hard to say. The studios and streaming services are going pretty far out to tap into stuff. Like, I would have never expected either the Umbrella Academy or The Boys to be adapted. Like, neither of those.
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately one of the struggles that you're always going to have with Chew is it's gross. Like it's pretty. There are a lot of points and times in Chew that it is just flat out gross.
Yeah. Well, the same can be said with The Boys, and I know I say that with the adaptation you got, but there's a lot of stuff in the comic that they just can't do. Also, finally, there has been some games made from Chew. One is a card game, which I think you have the card game, don't you, John?
I don't think I do.
Oh, I thought you picked it up.
I think I was going to, and then they wanted money for it. So.
Oh yeah, so they do have a card game, and apparently John doesn't have it out. They also there's an RPG in the works by
I just downloaded the Quick Start rules.
I downloaded the Quick Start rules and kind of took a look through it. It's interesting. It looks like there's potential there. It's a fairly narrative-driven game, which makes sense.
The card game is $20 on Amazon right now.
Oh, that might actually be worth picking up.
Yeah.
So if you want to do the quick start rules, Drive Through RPG has the quick start rules. You can download it from there. So now on to our final thoughts. And John, I'm going to let you go first.
My final thoughts. This story. This is my favorite comic. It really is. Going back through those two issues there kind of really reminded me of that. The fact that those last two completely surprised me, like took me unawares, like and changed the whole nature of how I thought about the entire piece. Things don't do that often, and when they do, you just need to acknowledge that is something amazing. This is a comic that is very special to me, and I think that it's also special in ways that people don't get. It's difficult to sort of like articulate, because like I have a lot of feelings, and mostly feelings there, but some thoughts there that all kind of like jumbled up. But it's just that it's grotesque, but in a way that has made it beautiful. There's something. It was something my mother always used to say to me when I was looking at different, like looking at art or reading something there, and she would always say, like, that's like how very French of you, because there's that old thing of like French love very pretty things and very ugly things. And this is kind of both of those things at the same time. Like this is, it deserves. I think it got a good go, but I still think it deserves more than it currently has. Like it is, I agree with that. And it is. It's so strong. It's able to take something that starts out completely insane. Like I memorize it because I like to, because I will like suggest it to people, and I'll say like, oh yes, it's the story of a semi-cannibalistic superpowered detective solving murders for the FDA during chicken prohibition. And I will just like say that all the time there, and to think that you can get something like that and end with this moment of true, it's not even cathartic, it's just this like true primal human tragedy at the end is, I mean, it's a masterwork. It is absolutely a masterwork of both writing and of art, because I cannot imagine it being any other artist here, because it's so much there. Like Tony is that picture, of Tony. Savoy is that picture of those things of Savoy there. Like they're that's who they are. And it's a powerful piece. And I'm going to stop talking before I ruin it, because when I am absolutely in love with a thing, that's something that I have a tendency to do.
So you summed up my thoughts pretty much exactly. When I picked it up 2010, when I picked up that first volume off the rack in Trent's comic shop, and read the first story arc, I was just baffled. Like, where the hell did this come from? This is crazy. Yeah. This is amazing. I picked it up and I read it that night. Went back to where I was staying, my friend Tom's house, and read it that night. And I picked up the volume, sort of binged them, because I'd always pick up 2 or 3 a couple at a time, because they'd release them and I'd be like, oh, I'm missing 2 volumes, I'll pick them up. The last 2 volumes I didn't read, and one of reasons why is because I knew we would want to revisit it on the podcast eventually. And we didn't pick it up. Like, I think they had just finished the story. And I think volume 11 had just released when we did the original episode on the old podcast. And so I picked up those two, and they sat on my shelf, and I'm like, someday we'll revisit this, and I'll read them. When we do, I'm going to read them for the podcast. And obviously the other podcast kind of died, and we started this up, and I knew that I wanted to. This was one of those ones that like, this is a priority. We need to talk about it. This is by far my favorite comic. I've got a bunch of them that I really like. Manhattan Projects is another one. I don't think you've read any of it. Fucking awesome. Yeah. Saga is a great one as well.
I mean, for me, the web comic turned normal comic, Kill 6 Billion Demons.
Yes, which we will eventually talk about. I actually got a bunch of digital copies.
Sweet.
From a Humble Bundle a while back. Sweet. So we will eventually talk about that. But just like you said, like, you can't imagine anybody else but Rob Guillory doing the artwork. John Layman created a masterful story. He's woven this story with all of these plot arcs and these disparate characters, and created this world that comes together in this culmination of this like sort of in your face last panel that's just shocking and amazing at the same time. And I'm excited that he's revisited this world with the CHU, focusing on a different character. And I'm excited that he wants to make a second series featuring Olive and he's basically said it's going to be a more sci-fi futuristic piece because, you know, it is going to focus on Olive. I'll actually be curious to where he takes it. If he's going to set it after Chew murders the head alien envoy, or if it's going to be set before that. It's going to be, I'm excited. And like you said, this comic, it's one of those where when it first came out, it was wildly loved. Like, a lot of people really liked it. It won those awards and stuff. And then it just sort of gradually faded into the back of people's memory. And it's almost obscure now. Yeah. Like, I'll talk to even people who like comics, and they'll be like, Kevin, I have no idea what that is. And I'll be like, oh, well, let me tell you.
Because you have obviously dropped the goddamn ball.
Even though we spoil the fuck out of it. There's so much. To the point where I've talked to John about this, I almost want to do a separate podcast, like a 60 episode podcast, or maybe a 70 episode podcast whenever we get around to it, that just goes through issue by issue and talks about this comic, because there's so much there, and I love it so much. So I implore you, read it. So with that, I think we're finished. I think this concludes this episode. Thanks for listening. And John, do you have any last words for us before we?
Not my hunky boys.
That's that. Relevant to Our Interests is hosted by John Belliston and Frank Shaw. Produced and edited by Frank Shaw. Theme music arranged by Frank Shaw. Scripting by John Belliston and Frank Shaw. Graphic design by Frank Shaw and Nathan Newell. You can contact us at relevanttoourinterests@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and what used to be Twitter. John and Frank are on many other social media platforms. Hit us up. You can listen to us everywhere you listen to podcasts.